Gagged, shackled, and bound. The day I had to call Schultz a liar for trying to misquote me was the day I was gagged. I had demanded my rights. I told them I demand my constitutional rights. I even banged on the table while I was talking. And Judge Hoffman, you know it, I said. I have a constitutional right to defend myself. They recessed the court, then came back, and Hoffman said, Mr. Seale, are you going to disrupt this court anymore? I'm not disrupting the court. I am going to make my request and demand that I have a right to defend myself because I know I have that right. Then Hoffman told the marshals, take the defendant and appropriately deal with him. That's the way Hoffman said it, in that very shitty manner. They took me back to the lockup right outside the courtroom. They got some tape and put it across my mouth. They handcuffed my hands down close to the legs of a metal folding chair and put the irons on my legs. They looped the chain through one of the rods running across the front of the folding part of the chair and brought it out and clasped it to my right leg. The jury came back in, and Judge Hoffman said some kind of crazy crap. Disregard this and disregard that. I shook my head from left to right at the jury and said, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. Some tears started rolling down one of the jurors' cheeks, and I looked at the jury again. Uh-huh. Hoffman said stuff like, Mr. Seale is trying to disrupt the court. I shook my head at the jury, to indicate I wasn't trying to disrupt. I sat there and something else came up. Hoffman said something else about me, so I rattled the handcuffs against the metal chair. Clang, 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 as a means of objecting, still trying to defend myself. A little later, they brought a witness on to testify, and my name was mentioned. Through the tape, I hollered, I object, in a muffled sound, but it could be heard. I object. The tape wasn't holding too well because of my beard, so I said again, I object, I object. I have a right to defend myself. So they took me out again. 2 or 3 marshals lifted the chair up and just took me back into the lockup. They put the tape back on me, put a rag around my mouth, tied the thing, and took me back into the courtroom. Later, Hoffman asked me if I would promise not to disrupt the court. He loved to use the words disrupt and outburst so the press could print disrupt and outburst and people wouldn't see what was really going on. What was involved was really an issue of constitutional rights. Hoffman said I should indicate my answer by shaking my head up and down for yes or left to right for no. I didn't shake my head up and down, nor did I shake it to the left or right. I said right through that gag, I have a right. My voice was muffled, but everybody could hear me. I have a right to defend myself. You know I have a right to defend myself, and you have no right to be gagging me and shackling me. I want to defend myself, and that's all I'm going for. People way in the back of the audience probably couldn't hear me at all, but the judge, the marshals, the press, and the audience close to me could hear. The next day, they strapped me to a wooden armchair, put a lot of padding in front of my mouth, and tied a big large rag around it. Another rag came up under my chin. The marshals tied a knot on the top of my head. The rag came across my mouth and went around the back of my neck. The first day I was shackled and gagged. A big black marshal put the iron around my leg real tight so that the blood circulation had actually stopped in my right leg. The second time they shackled me, I motioned to the girl law student sitting at the defense table to give me a piece of paper, and I wrote a note that the blood circulation was being stopped in my arms because of the way they had the handcuffs around my wrists. The only way I could get some relief was if I slouched way down in the chair. Somebody in the court said that my circulation was being stopped, and another marshal came and loosened the handcuffs. Next day they had some big straps instead of the handcuffs. Sit down in the chair, one of the marshals said. I sat down in the chair and said to myself, Hoffman looks like a damn fool sitting up there gagging me and carrying on. He knows that I've got a right to defend myself. He knows I should have a lawyer here, a lawyer of my choice, and he's foolish. So this cat started wrapping straps around my arm. Say, man, they're kinda tight, I said. That's just the way it's gonna have to be. Oh, shit, I said. He wrapped one strap down my leg and he said, Is that tight? No, they're not tight down there. Then he tightened them up some more. Later, another marshal came by and I said, Say, man, these things are too tight. So he loosened them. After that, he put the gag over my mouth. After I was gagged and everything, they went out, and this same big nigger punk pig tightened them right back up again around my arms. Just tightened them right back up again. Then he opened the door and said, Come on, to one of the other marshals who was standing outside the door, and they picked me up and took me to the table. I was trying to wriggle my hands to circulate the blood in my left arm. I was sitting there and court was going on. I was listening, and every once in a while I was trying to wiggle my hands. I sat there for a while, and I noticed that the circulation in my arms literally stopped unless I wiggled my hands. Then this one pig, sitting right beside me, tightened the straps right back up again, real tight. I kept trying to wiggle my hands, but wiggling them wasn't getting any blood circulating this time, so I started pushing the thing and pulling it, pushing and pulling, trying to get some blood circulation. I beckoned to the law student with my head. She was my means of communication with Gary. What do you want? She asked me. She'd say, Do you want a pencil? And I'd shake my head to indicate, Yeah. In fact, I tried to talk through the gag. While she was standing there trying to help me, Schultz interrupted and said something about, Your Honor, I'd like the court to know that the young lady touched Mr. Seale's hand in a very motherly way when he left the courtroom yesterday. He said that for the jury to hear, hoping to discredit her for trying to help me out. Anyway, I wrote a little note that said my blood circulation was being stopped, and I told her to give it to Wineglass and tell Wineglass to tell the court. They were still doing some kind of cross-examining up there. I tried to move the straps. Those wooden chairs are kind of smooth and varnished. My arm was sitting on top of the arm of the chair, and I tried to slip my arm over to the side. The straps were going around the arm of the chair, and by moving my arm off of the chair, that kind of loosened it. And I said, Ah. So I just pushed my arm back and forth. The straps were quite loose, and then started wriggling my hands to get some blood circulation. A big pig looked down and saw that I had loosened the straps and was wiggling my hand. He reached over and grabbed the strap, trying to tighten the strap up. Man, that hurt the hell out of my arm. When he pulled the strap, he pulled my arm tight against the chair again, and I was shaking my head. I started to mumble, but I couldn't half be heard. I want my blood circulation. I want to get my blood circulating. At the same time, he was reaching over me and jerking the chair. Two more marshals came up and grabbed at it. I bent forward and said, Ah! And the first pig stuck an elbow in my chest. His elbow knocked me back against the back of the chair. He hit me again. One marshal was trying to pick up the chair, and one was trying to sit the chair down, and I was pushing at the back of the chair, trying to get out of the way of this cat hitting me in the chest. But I also learned that even though my legs were strapped to the bottom of the legs of the chair, my feet were firmly on the floor, so that when he was elbowing me and I was pushing back with my feet, the chair would move. Then three more marshals attacked me, all at the same time, with the other two still trying to pick up the chair. The whole chair went up in the air and fell all the way back into the press section. The press was sitting directly behind the defense table, and I fell on top of them. They were frantically trying to get out of the way. All of the marshals ran up to me at once. This one cat was still elbowing me, tightening this strap up on my left hand. Another marshal came rushing in, and the chair rose halfway in the air again and fell over at an angle. Another pig rushed in, and his elbow hit me right in the balls. It hurt the hell out of me. At that point, I bent to my right. I turned my hand around inside the straps and finally got the tip of my fingers up near my mustache and yanked and pulled my head back, yanking the gag out of my mouth. I hollered out, You son of a bitch! You hit me in the balls! Don't hit me in my balls! I'm trying to get my blood circulation! I said it 3 or 4 times. I cursed him out, and I called him a fascist and everything. At the same time, the judge was hollering, "The court is adjourned! The court is adjourned!" The jury was running out. It looked like all 10 or 12 marshals were beating me over there and killing me. Jerry Rubin, who was sitting next to me, got up and hollered out, "Look what you're doing, elbowing that man. You hit him in the mouth." The judge said something. He was adjourning the court. It was just chaotic. This all happened because Judge Hoffman had gagged me, and then this rotten pig tried to treat me brutally while I was gagged and bound and shackled to this chair. It was a scene and a half, man. Finally, they got this other guy and they picked the chair up. Court was adjourned. While they were taking me out, I hollered out, "Cruel and unusual punishment." I don't even think they got that on the record, but I hollered it out. "Cruel and unusual punishment." And I said, "You're a bunch of fascists. You're a fascist dog, Judge." I just got hit in the testes and had been elbowed in the chest, and my blood circulation was gone. It was something else. They shut the door, and then this big marshal said, "You're just making this hard on yourself." "I ain't making nothing hard on myself," I said. "You're just in cahoots with the damn judge. You're working with them." The next morning, when they tried to gag me, I thought I was going to die. I mean, really die, because of the way they were doing things. I was in the lockup before court convened, and they said, "Sit in the chair." "Don't tighten those things too tight on me," I said. This one marshal said, "We're not going to tighten them too tight." So they strapped me down, and after they strapped me down, this one cat who said he wasn't going to tighten the things too tight said, "Bobby, we're going to put something in your mouth." "No, you're not going to put a damn thing in my mouth," I said. "Not in my mouth." "Well, we have to put something inside your mouth. The judge has ordered it, and that's what we're going to do." "No, sir, you're not putting anything in my mouth." I'd already made up my mind that if he so much as got his fingers near my mouth, I was going to bite his motherfucking fingers off, because I wasn't going to let him put anything in my mouth. "You better not try to put it in my mouth, because I got tonsillitis, and it's going to exhaust me along with this other infection I'm being treated for. With all this penicillin in me, my temperature goes up 1.5 degrees, sometimes 2 degrees, and I have to go to sleep to get my temperature down. So don't you be putting anything in my mouth. I'm not letting you put it in my mouth. No way." "Grab his head," the marshal said. I was shackled down. One of the marshals put the palms of his hands on top of my head. He stepped up to me. He had rubber gloves on and was holding a wad of rag that was rolled up. It was about 1 inch or 1.5 inches long, and 1 inch in diameter. He was going to jam this junk down my mouth. I was shackled down, legs, arms, everything. He grabbed my nose and held that wad of rag about 3 or 4 inches from my mouth. I figured he was going to try to wait until I ran out of breath by holding my nose, knowing I wanted to keep my mouth shut. He was going to wait until I needed some breath, and when I opened my mouth, he would move real fast and jam the rag in it. But it ain't going to work, I thought to myself. It ain't going to work. So I sat there. After a while, I began to need some breath. I held and held my breath as long as I could. He was getting ready to jam the rag into my mouth, but before I opened my mouth, I jerked my head to the left and then to the right real fast and got loose from the grip the other marshal had on my head and the grip that this marshal had on my nose. I put my head down and started catching my breath. I looked up. They had stepped back. The next time they tried it, the cat put his arm around my head as if he were wrestling with somebody. Only I was sitting shackled in the chair and he was standing up. He put his arm around my head so that the back of my head was sitting against his chest. His arm headed downwards, coming across my right ear. The cat grabbed my nose again. I was mad, man. I was mad as a motherfucker. "You sons of bitches," I said. "You rotten dogs." They held me again and held my nose. When it began to look like I needed breath, he set the wad of rags right up against my lips and began to press real hard with the palm of his hand. He pressed so hard that I could even feel the blood seeping out of my gums, and I could feel the inside of my lips busting, because I was holding out. I was holding out as hard as I could. Then I began thinking, I'm going to pass out. I'm gonna pass out. I didn't want to pass out. Then I got scared. I knew I wasn't going to let those cats put that rag in my mouth. I thought a whole lot of things. Things flashed off in my head. I became aware of my feet being on the floor and wanting to push back and go to the left, but the cat holding my head could feel the tension in my body, and he held tighter and harder. I was feeling like I was going to pass out, and I didn't want to pass out. I didn't want to be forced to pass out, and this cat was pushing against my mouth. So I pushed with my feet, and somehow I began to use my weight with the chair. My legs were attached to the legs of the chair. I pushed real hard. I was about to pass out. I thought about Eldridge, and I thought about the struggle and everybody in the party, and I was thinking about Nat Turner, all kinds of crazy things. I even had the notion that I wouldn't open my mouth, even if I passed out, although I knew that when you pass out, your mouth automatically opens before you die. All of a sudden, I pushed with all of my weight, and next thing I knew, I had this cat pinned up against the wall. He was in back of the chair, holding my head, and I had him pinned between the wooden chair and the wall. I had pushed all the way back, almost 2.5 feet, and he had let go of my head. His body was between the wall and the chair, and I was pushing and yanking, and he was trying to push the chair away from the wall, and I was jamming him back against the wall. I was loose, I felt free, and I started breathing. This other cat said, "We can't put this in this cat's mouth. That damn judge. Why did he order us to do this shit anyway?" They decided not to put anything in my mouth, but that was some battle that I fought with them. The marshal holding my head was a white cat, and the marshal trying to jam the rag in my mouth was a black cat. They were working together. They're both pigs. It doesn't make any difference what color they are. The black marshal said, "Well, we're not going to do it. We can't do it. We did what we could." Then they got some bandage. It was a roll of the tape that football players and basketball players use to wrap around their legs. You wrap it around your legs, and as you move, it becomes tighter. They had a piece about 3 inches wide. First, they put some tape and some heavy padding all across my mouth, and they began to wrap. They wrapped all the way around. They wrapped it tight, very tight. Then they bored it under my chin and wrapped it above my head and under my chin. Actually, it was covering my throat too. They got it real tight. I started losing my breath again. I was getting choked by the bandage. I started shaking my head from left to right, and the cat says, "I think he's losing his breath." So they unwrapped it real quick. They started again and made it a point to come right under my chin and keep it away from my throat. They still wrapped it too tight, because when I came out in the courtroom and looked to the left and looked to the right, that thing got tighter and tighter. The blood began to stop coming up to my head. That was too much. I started shaking my head, and Jerry Rubin and a couple of other people stood up. "He's passing out. That thing is too tight on him." I started shaking my head and got my arm slightly loosened. I pushed my head down, and with the tip of my finger got hold of the gag and pulled it off. I called Judge Hoffman every kind of thing I could call him. Fascist, sanctioning cruel and unusual punishment and breaking the 8th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. The marshal snatched up the chair and was trying to rush me back to the lockup. Court was adjourning, and there was all this commotion because the shit was getting to the point where I was about to pass out. That stuff was wrapped around me too damn tight. I was calling Hoffman a fascist and constantly referring to the 8th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, where it says, "There shall be no cruel and unusual punishment inflicted." And this big old pig marshal put his hand around my mouth and nose and started pulling. The other marshals grabbed the chair and started dragging it. But when they got to the door, there was a little rise caused by the carpet molding between the door and the concrete floor, and the chair stopped. I was still calling them about everything I could think of, and the marshals were jumping all around me, trying to get the chair out. This big pig grabbed me around my face and covered my mouth so I couldn't say anything, but I wiggled away from him. He grabbed me again and covered my nose and my mouth until I couldn't even breathe. He let go, and I started hollering out again. The door was still open. He tried to reach to close it, but before he could, I was hollering so loud he reached back, grabbed my mouth and nose again so I couldn't breathe, and just held me there. Then he hollered to one of the other marshals. Everybody in the courtroom seemed to be filing out. The judge was going out while all this was happening. Judge Hoffman was ordering them out. It wasn't an outburst, and it wasn't an attempt to disrupt the court. What it was a man trying to gain his constitutional right to defend himself, or to have his lawyer there. It is his choice according to the United States Supreme Court. I was pretty sure the United States Supreme Court had said that you can have a lawyer of your choice who is effective, and if this is not possible, the defendant has a right to defend himself. Hoffman didn't see it that way, and they re-gagged me, but real loose. They loosened the straps. When they brought me back in the chair, Weinglass and Tom Hayden made a motion that the court take notice of the fact that Charles R. Gary was my lawyer. They said they were going to see Gary over the weekend. Hoffman adjourned court early that Friday so Hayden and Weinglass could go see Gary in San Francisco. Anyone can read the court record and see that I wasn't trying to sabotage the trial, but that I was only trying to get my constitutional right to either defend myself or to have my lawyer present, recognized. But Judge Hoffman wouldn't recognize it. The following Monday, they didn't gag me. I didn't say anything all day because my name never came up. Nobody said anything about Kunstler being my lawyer that day, so I just sat there. That morning, before the jury came in, Hoffman said he wouldn't gag me if I would act right. He put it in his little old jive way. I said I was going to demand my constitutional rights, and that I would continue to demand my constitutional rights. I tried to explain to him that I had been subjected to cruel and unusual punishment, so that another of my constitutional rights, the Eighth Amendment, had been violated. I sat down and didn't have anything else to say. Nobody said anything against me. Then they brought a witness to the stand who was testifying against me. He mentioned my name, so I stood up and said that I objected to this witness testifying against me because my lawyer was not there. That was late Monday afternoon. I said that I had requested and deserved the right to cross-examine the witness myself. "Mr. Seale," Hoffman says, in his little sarcastic, dramatized, puny racist manner, "I remind you that you have a lawyer." "I don't have a lawyer at all, and I have something to say on behalf of myself," I told him. "You keep telling me that I have a lawyer, but I don't have a lawyer." I went on to tell the court that Kunstler was not my lawyer. I made it clear, with every piece of emotion and feeling that I could get forth, that Kunstler was not my lawyer. The jury saw it, and everybody saw it. The jury was well aware by this time that I didn't have a lawyer. They were well aware that Hoffman was messing over me. And Hoffman knew, the jury knew. I saw a woman juror cry. I was always hoping that none of those jurors had been bought off by the government. When I said, after being gagged, that I had no lawyer, I think the jury must have seen even more what the situation was. Tuesday morning court convened, and I made up my mind that I was going to demonstrate to Judge Hoffman that I could adequately act in my own defense. This was another way of arguing for my right to defend myself. After the jury came in, Hoffman asked Kunstler and Weinglass if they wanted to cross-examine the witness. They both said, "No, the witness isn't testifying against our clients, and we do not represent Mr. Seale." I got up and said, "I would like to approach the lectern and ask the witness, a San Francisco sheriff, some questions." I asked him if he had ever killed a Black Panther Party member or participated in any raids on a Black Panther Party office or on a Black Panther Party's member's home. I asked him why he goes around following people in airports when they're traveling and when they're buying tickets. "Sit down," Hoffman said. "I'm going to ask another question," I said. Hoffman told me to sit down again. I was just getting ready to sit down, so I said, "This is a fascist operation. and turned and sat down. Hoffman cooled his marshals off. He didn't have them attack me as they had done previously. Hoffman adjourned the court, and that afternoon he came back and read off a bunch of crap. He just took everything out of context and didn't report things as they really happened. He just read the court record and said, this was contempt of court, and this was contempt of court, and this was contempt of court. In every last one of those instances, I was talking about my right to defend myself, my constitutional rights. He sat up and asked me if I wanted to defend myself or if I wanted to speak in behalf of myself after he got through reading off all those so-called contempts. I told him that I didn't want to speak to him because he wouldn't let me speak before on behalf of myself. I'm not going to beg you for no time, I told him. How long have you been putting black people in jail and in prisons and railroading people and denying them their constitutional rights? I asked him. Then I sat down. He gave me 4 years in prison. He sentenced me unjustly. He sentenced me to 4 years in prison because I had demanded my constitutional rights. He declared a mistrial only for me because the jury never would have gone along with him. That's the real reason. He tried to obscure it and say that it was something else, but 4 or 5 people on that jury were really mad. Those people didn't like Judge Hoffman. I was looking at them when I was gagged. Hoffman was observing that jury too. He knew what he was doing. So in essence, that is how the Chicago 8 trial turned into the Chicago 7 trial.